Job proves that you can believe you're in faith, but really in fear. You see, some people don't realize that fear is not the opposite of faith. But in fact, fear is a form of faith. It's belief in the worst. Fear is faith in the worst. It is the tail sides of the coin of faith. It is the flesh's equivalent to faith. So when you walk by faith, you walk in the Spirit. But when you walk by fear, you walk in the flesh. Now, the Bible says that Jesus is the author and finisher of your faith. That word finisher actually translates as developer. You see, God is about developing your faith, okay? And to him, it's like gold, the Bible says. In the same way that gold or money spins and gets us a reward, so our faith gets God a reward as well as us. Therefore, our faith is as gold to God. And so as such, he's all about developing what you believe. He's all about developing your faith. And some of us may be in more fear than we're in faith. Or at the very least, the fear can become the impetus for us believing. Now, I can be believing God for the best because I'm afraid of the worst. And so the basis of my faith could be fear. Watch Job. Job was obedient. When God had a conversation with Satan, he said, "Have you considered my servant Job? He eschews evil. I have none like him." That word "eschews" is a King James word that means runs from evil. How many people do you know that run from evil? God said he was upright. In his actions, Job was upright. He ran from evil. But watch what happened. When everything fell apart and Job lost everything, his money, his kids, his reputation, when he lost it all, he said, "That thing which I fear most has come upon me." That which I fear most has come upon me. Do you realize what Job was saying? You see, when he was praying for his kids and believing for his kids, it was really because he was afraid of losing them. Isn't that what fear is about? The fear of loss? All the devastation that befell Job all came from his fear. You see, you have to understand this. If fear is the fleshly form of faith, and faith calls God, fear calls the enemy. If faith calls the blessing, then fear calls the cursing. You see, the Bible says that without faith, without works, my faith is dead. You see, without works, your fear is also dead. My fear ignites God's blessing, just like my fear ignites the cursing. But if I am not acting in fear, then I cannot see the curse. If I'm not acting in faith, I can't see the blessing. See, every time Job offered a sacrifice, he thought he was walking by faith, but really he was walking by fear, and he was giving his fears life. If faith without works is dead, so is fear without works dead. And so my action, putting action to my faith, actually brings about the blessing. Jesus said to the guy with the withered hand, "Stretch out your hand." If he had not taken an act of faith and stretched it out, you see, it's not enough to believe, but there must be action accompanying your faith, or your faith is dead. It's not enough to fear. There must be an action accompanying your fear, or your fear is dead. It works in the same way. It works in the exact same fashion. So every time Job offered a sacrifice, he was doing it in fear, and he was calling the curse. Every time Job was obedient because he was afraid of not being obedient, he was calling darkness. Do you know that I can think that I'm in faith, but in reality I am in fear? Oh, come on now. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Why do you pray for protection for your children? Job was praying for protection for his kids. He was afraid something's going to befall them. He prayed over his finances because he was afraid of being poor. He prayed over all the things that God gave him because he's afraid of losing them. You see, sometimes we can do things because we think we're supposed to. The Bible says that true faith works by love. You see, if my faith isn't working by love, then 9 times out of 10, it may be fear-based faith. I may be motivated by fear, believing God for the best because I'm terrified of the worst. Some of you understand what that means. Some of you write your first fruits and you send your tithes, but when you're writing your check, you're not feeling the love towards God necessarily. You just want to get that money out of your house because, will a man rob God? You see, you'd be amazed that if you looked within the inner recesses of your heart, just how much of you is obeying out of what we call, what I've come to dub as a fear-based faith. Oh, come on now. A husband, you love your wife because you're afraid she won't love you back. Or wives, you love your husband because you're afraid of his reaction. You do things for your kids because you're afraid they're not going to accept you. Oh, why do you go to work? Because you love your job? No, but you're afraid what happens if you don't. If you looked within yourself, you would perceive how much of us are really walking in fear, albeit in the name of faith.